Welcome to Outdoorsy, the podcast where we are redefining the word itself. I'm your host, Madeline. Today on Outdoorsy, I am excited to introduce Maria Baker, the founder of Nobody's Princess, a snow apparel brand that's all about empowering women through innovative, technical designs. Maria's mission is to foster confidence among female snow sport enthusiasts, creating a space where women of all shapes, sizes, and skill level feel comfortable and capable in the outdoors. She successfully crowdfunded her company and within just 2 years achieved retail distribution in nearly 40 stores across Australia, New Zealand, and Japan. She's also been recognized as a finalist in the Melbourne Young Entrepreneur of the Year 2023. That's a long title. And the recipient of the inaugural Air Wallix Startup Grant. I'm excited to dive into her story, learn more about how she's breaking down barriers in the outdoor industry as a whole, her thoughts on the intersection of sports and fashion and technical gear, and really just how she's fostering inclusivity and empowerment for women in the outdoors. So Maria, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Wow, you make me sound so good. It's funny, hearing all of that okay, I've done it, but I don't look at it as one giant chunk like that. So it's nice to hear that. So thank you for the lovely welcome.
You're welcome. Well, you deserve all the accolades. I mean, just following your work online has been great. I've been reading some of the other publications and stuff that have talked about the work that you're doing. And I think it's so important and appreciate you. And I'm so excited to dive into the details and really get to pick your brain about all of this.
Well, let's do it.
Awesome. Okay. Let's just start with this first question, which we ask everybody on the podcast, which is, how do you define outdoorsy?
Outdoorsy for me, coming as a non-traditional outdoorsy, because I'm not a super big hiker, or I don't go, bouldering, or I don't do rock climbing and mountain biking or any of those things, but I like being outdoorsy. So, I think being outdoorsy, the term outdoorsy is literally just anything out in the sun or outside your home, outside where you live. I think that outdoorsy has become really cliquey and almost, there's a status with it and it shouldn't. So for me, outdoorsy is just being outside, whether it's laying on the grass or, sitting in a camp chair, or it's, doing an Everest base camp hike. It is all outdoorsy. So for me, it's just, it's all inclusive of anything once you step foot off that concrete, I guess.
I cannot agree more. This is such a through line with everybody that's been on the podcast, is that outdoorsy feels like it's this elitist label that only belongs to the most extreme or the most quote unquote professional. But in reality, like you said, it's just, are you outdoors? Are you being safe? Are you enjoying yourself? Okay.
Yeah.
That's outdoorsy. That's about it.
And it's funny because then you wonder, how did we get to that point? How did we get to that elitism where, if it wasn't the most extreme, or you weren't, tracking your hikes on Strava, or, posting on how you're increasing your time per hike or whatever, how did we get to that point? Because, as you said, most people you talk to will classify it the same as what I just have, and you've confirmed that. So it's like, wow, how did we get there? Is it marketing? Is it brands? Is it companies? What drove that? What drives that, I suppose, facade? Anyway.
It's such a good question though. And I feel like we could maybe get into this a little bit
for sure
in your episode, because I think snow sports in particular are, at least for me, in my mind, one of those things that I've always just proactively excluded myself from, because it seems so extreme, or it seems so technical, or the gear was always really expensive. And I always saw people who were skiing and snowboarding as these people who were the ultimate granola-y outdoorsman that I just couldn't fit in with. And I just always have proactively excluded myself, not necessarily because I've ever had a bad encounter with a snowboarder or a skier, but maybe just because of what I've seen depicted online, or a lot of times with brands who they showcase in their marketing, seem like one particular type of person. And so you just, in your brain, if you don't see it represented, you can't imagine it for yourself, So 100%. I don't know. I wonder if there's something to unpack there, especially with some of those more quote unquote extreme sports or cost prohibitive sports as well.
Well, I was the exact same before I started, going to the snow, and then especially moving forward with the brand. I was the exact same person, so, as you just described. So definitely a lot to kind of chat on with that.
Well, let's get
You'll
into
have
it
to
then.
hold me back. You'll have to hold
Yeah,
me back. I'll go too far. I'll go too far.
no, there's no such thing. We can start like at the beginning though. Because I want to get into it, but I do want to, I want to hear your story. Like you said, you kind of
Yeah.
started out with not really feeling like you identified with this at all. And you started out kind of non-traditional. So tell me about your journey. Like, did you grow up loving the outdoors? Is this something you learned later in life? Like, how did you get into this realm?
I suppose, like, for me, I definitely grew up as my definition of outdoorsy. I grew up in a farm in South Australia where my family did produce farming. So I'm actually from a Greek migrant family that came to Australia. So for me, being outdoors was what I did pretty much every day, but it wasn't hiking or beach or, you know, heaps of camping. I did a little bit, but it was mostly like just being outside, working outside, playing outside. And so I like being outside, love the sun, and I definitely grew up loving the beach, but not that traditional, portrayed outdoorsy. I wasn't going on hikes, did a little bit of camping with my friends in my early 20s and late teens sort of thing. I did a lot of caravanning around Australia with like my parents and my grandparents, which was super fun, but that's, because that's what we could afford. We'd take our van, we'd drive around Australia on our school holidays and stuff like that. But in terms of the more extreme stuff, the snowboarding, the skiing and all that, that didn't come until I was 30. Basically, I grew up in what's known as, the driest state and the driest country, driest continent in the world. And so didn't even know snow really existed in Australia until I was in my sort of like early 20s. And it wasn't until I moved to Melbourne and met some people here that were snowboarders that they kind of, said, come along. And really, I just went because, they were new friends. We were trying to make new friends, do new things. And I'm like, cool, I love the beach and heat, but sure, let's go do this snow thing. Why not? I always wanted to go, so let's go. And I just fell in love with it. It was insane. I did not have any expectation to think that my life was going to then revolve around it, a few years later. But I did. I bought my first snowboard like the second or third weekend I went up, and I was in. All of a sudden, I think I've determined that I like water. It doesn't matter what stage it's in, but I like water. So definitely did not have that upbringing. But yeah, you're right. It didn't take very long to realize the different clicks, the different levels of status, both financially and activity wise, that existed, and that really stuck out, a lot, especially when it came to clothing, which was my first pain point, which is why I suppose I gravitated to starting this business. Realizing, I was so naive even for the first year or two. Like, I knew it was expensive to kind of get started. If you're not committed, if you're not buying season passes, if you've not already got your gear, a weekend trip is really, really expensive. And I didn't really click even until, a few years in when, you talk to people on chairlifts about how elite traditionally skiing and even snowboarding had become, and, the levels of money involved and buying lodges and living on mountain. And, it just blew my mind. And then the next part was, the clicks that existed based on your activity, even outside of the snow. So, for me, I started snowboarding. It's what seemed most natural in my mind. The idea of having my legs on two separate things was more daunting than strapped together on one plank of wood. So I went down that path, and, all of a sudden you'd get the questions like, oh, do you mountain bike? Do you hike? Are you a surfer? Did you skateboard? Like, and I didn't do any of those things, and I still don't do any of those things. And it's really funny because it's almost like, well, if you don't partake in the sports on off season, quote unquote, then it's almost like you pull yourself out of this clique or a niche or a category, and like it becomes a struggle because if you don't live and breathe those other things, then how legitimately do you like what you're doing, or how serious are you? Which is just stupid when you think about it. But definitely experienced all those things in those first few years of like getting to the snow. And to stack on top of that, starting as a 30-year-old, 31 actually, just about, brings a whole new level again, because all of a sudden you're not young, you're not in the in crowd with the youngins, as this old person can say, and you're not also someone who's grown up. in the snow, haven't been skiing or snowboarding since you're 2 or 3 and have that lifelong community. And that's really daunting. Like, that's really scary. And you feel that even though you might not be, even though people might not be outwardly, saying that or, actively excluding you, you feel it. It's this unspoken shit fest, really. It's shit. It's really shit. And like, we can get into it a bit later, but that's something I really want to change because you're right. It all then comes back to representation. And if you're only seeing one type of person being at the snow, then of course, like you said, you don't want to go because you automatically feel like you don't fit in. But the reality is there's these tens of thousands of women who go who all don't feel like they fit in. So I'm like, cool, let's get us together. Let's make something for us because, we are an ignored demographic, even though we're one of probably, the biggest. And, we're the ones that have money. We're a bit older, we've got careers, we're doing, we've got jobs that can support this activity as well. So we're going, but then the rest of it's sort of putting a halt to that, putting a block to it. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm so curious to dive into hearing more about how you started your company too, because I think that kind of brings together all of these things that you were just
Yeah.
talking about too, especially like it's shocking how few outdoorsy brands prioritize creating products, clothing, apparel, technical gear specifically made for women, not only because there are just as many women doing outdoorsy sports as men, but also because women oftentimes hold more of the buying power because they're oftentimes making the purchasing decisions for their entire family or their partners. And so don't you want to cater to them and speak to them and make
Yes.
things for them? Like, I just think that there's so much brilliance behind what you've been able to tap into. And I would love to hear you tell the story about how you started Nobody's Princess and like how that all came to be.
Well, I suppose it is because, like, the very first, like, even before I went, the friends were like, you'll rent some gear, rah, 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 rah. And, like, they're like, oh, but we really recommend you, get some pants and boots for yourself because they're really hard to fit into from the rental stuff. So, straight off the get go, not even set foot on the snow, I had to go buy pants because I suppose being that sort of mid-sized body shape and sizing, they already knew I was going to struggle getting into any of the rental stuff. And then the challenge in buying those pants from the start was, especially trying to buy something from a sale rack because I didn't know if I was going to like it or not, was really intimidating. But, found something, got there. But then really quickly, the pair I had bought were really cheap on sale, weren't really technical enough. Like, I have so many pictures from my friends where I'd spend my lunchtime with my butt literally glued to a fireplace because my bottom was so wet because the gear I had wasn't waterproof. And as beginner snowboarder, you're on your ass a lot. So when I started getting into it and committed, I think I went through 3 pairs of pants that I ripped because I just wasn't fitting into them. And for context for the listeners, I'm about 6 foot tall and about a US size 10 to 12 on my bottom half. I'm quite an extreme pear shape. And so finding gear, and do you know what? I was even maybe closer to like an 8 or 10 when I actually first started. So even a bit smaller, and I still struggled. I was maxing out the XLs in most brands. And then being that bit more, I suppose, conscious of what the fashion was in snowboarding, because snowboarding especially is very fashion conscious as a sport, didn't want to then jump into the plus sizes because the range there was horrible. So, you squeeze into the XL and you keep ripping the crotch on your pants because your hips move and bend and flex every time you want to do up your bindings. So that's what ultimately kind of led to this idea of needing better apparel. And, the more I talked about it, as I would, I'd be sitting in a chairlift and, oh shit, I've blown out my crotch again. And, the size 2 person next to me be like, yeah, I've done that too. And I'm like, but you're tiny compared to me. It was like really adamant. It became really apparent that it was a shape issue, not a fit issue. It was a fit issue, not a size issue in a sense. So that's where the idea kind of came from. And, I guess something like that's really hard to start. And I actually had a false start, in a sense that I reckon it must have been about 2 or so years in. I kind of kept thinking about this because I kept struggling. And I tried to start doing a bit of research and really had no idea what I was doing, and kind of, you know, looked online to look for manufacturers, or can I buy something from Alibaba and just get them to tweak it, and all the stuff you might do with smaller types of products, and nothing was really sticking. And I didn't really know and probably had the time to commit to researching it because I was working full time. And it just kind of became this false attempt, and it went back into the little white notebook I had and put away in the top drawer sort of thing. So it wasn't until 2020 when COVID hit and I got stood down from my job because I was working. So my background is as a graphic designer, and I was working within the travel industry, and the travel industry came to an absolute halt. The business I was working for was doing more refunds in a month than they did as annual sales in a year sort of thing, which was a really scary time. And so we all got stood down, and I suppose it's funny. I'm a huge believer in serendipity, not so much fate or destiny, but definitely serendipity. And the timing just kind of started aligning where I started doing some networking online because I didn't know what my future job prospects was going to be, and whether I was going to actually come back into this role at that point, or, COVID was going to be all over in 3 months or not, sort of thing, or if I was going to have to find a new job. So I started doing some like networking online and talking to people about the idea I had because I had the time to do it. And, the people I told were really supportive and like kind of went, yes, this is something, like you should pursue it. And yeah, met some people from that networking that did like business plans, and, we'll do some contra work for each other. And it kind of just slowly started to build from there. LinkedIn popped up and said, hey, do you want a free like premium trial? And I went, sure. So I could actually reach out to some people and reach out to some like technical fashion designers and go, hey, I've got this crazy idea. Like, do you want to work together? And, if I hadn't had that, I wouldn't have been able to contact these people and find the woman that eventually helped me start designing. And so it was really born out of that. It was a long process to get from there to where I am now. But through it all, it was kind of just like, at the end of the day, at least I'll have a really good pair of like prototype pants that I can wear, and at least I'll be comfortable. But it really like was interesting because when I first then started, the biggest part of developing this wasn't actually the gear in a sense. It was getting the research and getting the pain points from everyone and seeing what women were really struggling with. And it was those things like, was it price? Was it like eco-friendly materials? Was it, their size or their shape? And where were they ripping their pants? And who were these women? And how old were they? And what age were they? And what were their body shapes? And, what size did they kind of recognize themselves as? But what measurements did they have? And it was doing all of that. And through all of that research and those conversations, one of the biggest things came out was like, yeah, I'm not represented. I'm not catered for. This is hard. I haven't even gone because I can't find gear. And I was just like, oh, holy shit, this is bigger than just making some pants, making some clothing. So that's where it all sort of started, I guess.
It's incredible. And tell us, I mean, where's Nobody's Princess now? I mean, people can hopefully, I'll have the link to the site in the show notes for anybody listening who wants to click through, but like, where are you at now, and where do you hope to take the brand in the future?
So basically, like, I'll preface it with like a little timeline to catch us up to where it is now. But basically, from that first year, it took 2 years to basically develop and get a first like pant on the market, and that was really only possible through some crowdfunding. So as you mentioned, I did a Kickstarter, and that was really going to be the make or break. I didn't know whether I didn't have all that money sitting around. That's for sure. I didn't even have a job at that point, and it was really interesting to see how many women were obviously so annoyed by what was on the market that they were willing to throw a couple $100 onto an online thing. And I say this, and you'll kind of go, why? But like, to an Australian company or person as well, because, you don't think about the snow and think about Australia. And there's always been these even, people try to make this correlation that if it's coming from Australia, that it's not going to be good enough. It's not going to be technical enough for, your American or Canadian or even European slopes or conditions. So it was really amazing to see that, nearly 50% of the women that even backed this Kickstarter were from the US, and they were desperate enough to put faith into something, no matter where it came from. So from that first prototype came the first style of pant, and then that was in 2022 that got released. And then a second style pant came for 2023. And then this year finally released bibs and jackets too. So really started from this idea of a small, humble online business to actually having stockists, because the stockists saw the gap in the market too. And what was really incredible is that, we get, and this is one of the parts where I think sometimes we as women might stereotype men a little too hard, is that, there is definitely disparity in genders when it comes to pay, sport, a lot of things. But the disparity in attitude that we tend to sometimes manifest, that men just don't give a shit, is not quite there. And I can only say that having experience from being in the position to really chatting to store owners, because, I think the biggest memory I had was like, I went to the trade shows in Australia, and this was basically the second year where I brought out the second style of pants, and they had started to make a name for themselves. And, I had people coming to me wanting to stock them in the stores. I didn't even have to do the legwork, which was great, because I hate that. I'm so scared of doing sales calls. It's not funny. But having these 65-year-old men who'd been running their business, and it wasn't just like, you can feel a gap where we're losing sales. They were actually coming and telling me how much they hated seeing women leave absolutely devastated, because they felt completely useless to offer them a solution. And it wasn't about the sale. It was about how horrible they just felt as another human being, that they couldn't do something to make this person that comes into their store feel better. Seeing that and hearing that over and over again from all these store owners, because a large majority of these store owners are older gentlemen, it was really eye-opening too, that, okay, there is definitely a problem with the apparel and who's making it, but on a more personal level, between that store owner and a client, there's this genuine want to help, and they recognize it. And that was pretty cool. And I've kind of gone off on a tangent, but yeah, so it's just like, yeah, where we're at now is mainly because, like, I've seen that there's this genuine care across, everyone from participants to store owners to, the people running resorts and all that. Yeah, I've just gone off on a huge tangent.
No, I think it's
But
great. I think it's great.
it's,
I love hearing
yeah.
it.
But yeah, so the business now, yeah, it's stocked in a whole bunch of stores across Australia and New Zealand. Still have a really big online presence from US. Like, one of the biggest things I'm kind of trying to work towards is that my schedule is still sort of geared towards Australian seasons. So, most brands were bringing out their new stock now, whereas I did it, 4 months ago, sort of thing. But that's where then hopefully can crack into that sort of retail market, because that's the next sort of thing in the US that I'm hearing a lot of, is like, where can I try them on in the US? And yeah, so that's where the business has come today. And, a big part of that is realizing some of the other problems, like we talked about, in the environment, in the representation of snow sports, and how I can hopefully change some of those things too.
Yeah, there's two avenues I kind of want to ask you more about here. One is about kind of like the process of making the pants themselves, and thinking through like size inclusion and different size bodies and things like that, and being mindful of that, because that's like a whole other thing. And then I also want to talk to you about that last piece that you just touched on, which is just kind of the environment of this like kind of male centric outdoorsy community, where a lot of products historically have been specifically catering to men. Marketing's been catered to men, or marketing's been catered to women, but only women in a very particular type of body. And so there's kind of like two avenues I want to like kind of traverse down there together.
Maybe let's continue on the like environment thing, and we can come back to the whole how I got to the product and the garment and the inclusivity, because that's, yeah. So one of the biggest things that, as I started to build this brand, was around like, for me, it kind of made sense that the women who are wearing it should be showing off the different sizes and shapes. And I suppose it's weird because sometimes you think of something and it seems really logical to you, and it's not until somebody else points it out that you go, this was actually a big problem, and I realized. And I suppose, yes, looking on other brands and going, and it's gotten better, right? It's not like this completely anymore, but even just going back, 4 or 5 years ago, yes, the norm was that you log on to any clothing website or any brand, be it snow or outdoor hiking or just general clothing, and you're almost conditioned to just accept that you're going to log on and the person's not going to look like you 99% of the time. And I say this very carefully because I'm not saying it to discriminate against smaller people, but, there's a high chance that the model is a petite blonde person, a petite blonde woman. And I don't want to say that in hate, like, I just want to make that very clear, but it's the common figure that you see and you almost just accept it. So when I was thinking about it, I wasn't really going, oh, I need to change the narrative because this is what I'm sick of seeing. I too had only just accepted it. But because of what I was doing, I was like, cool, I need to showcase women that are different shapes and sizes so people can really understand what I'm building. It wasn't I need to represent more women. That was just almost natural instinct. It was I need to showcase what I'm building and the diversity of what I'm building. And so it has been really interesting because now that I stopped to take a look at it properly and go, holy shit, like I get so frustrated that year on year I'm still seeing these brands come up with the same person and they only have one or two models. And it really, and it's not just like, again, it's not just the men. Like I know that there are plenty of female brands, female owned brands that still don't come to the party with inclusivity. But yeah, kind of like trying to have make this path in this very male centric world is really interesting because like you touched on earlier, it's not actually that male centric. The market is not just men and it's not majority men. Like I know from the research I've done, like you said, attendance to snow resorts and, general outdoor activity, it's like nearly 50-50. It's something like the last one I looked at, and this is specifically for Australia, I think it was like 48.5%. And then from one of the ones I looked at for the US in general, it was like 45% attendance and like, participation. And that's pretty much 50-50, right? So then you kind of go, yeah, why isn't this apparel made for both? So yeah, navigating this space where it is very male centric, it's been interesting to kind of show, it's almost like people get blinded, like they turn a blind eye to the statistics because when, you can approach someone, a store, or, for me, it's approaching a new retailer and go, this is needed, here's the stats, here's the visitation that I'm getting on my website and the resorts are getting right. And they almost just turn a blind eye. And it's funny because like you said, women tend to, and there is a statistic for this, but I don't know it off the top of my head, so I'm not going to pick a random number, but it is more in favor that women are planning trips to the snow, planning trips for family holidays and camping and whatever. They're the ones buying everything. They'll go buy the kids' clothing. Heck, a lot of women will buy their partner's clothing and go, here, I know what size you are. I'm going to go do it. So why wouldn't you, cater to those sorts of buying trends, I suppose, and then making it easier and for women to shop? Because I don't know if you've ever done it, but I've certainly done it, that if I'm going to buy 3 or 4 things, but I can't find the one, I'll get frustrated and walk out and not buy any of it. So I could totally see that happening for a woman, say, who's buying something for their family. And if she can't find what she needs, she's not going to buy the rest of the gear and maybe try again later or go online or, and so why wouldn't you cater? I got asked this question the other day, actually. It's like, there's a lot of backlash still from men, their attitudes towards females in business, females in sports, the inclusivity issues, and they're still really just closed-minded and won't. And like, what could we do to fix that? And my biggest sort of thoughts around it is like, we can educate, but I think there's a large understanding that we're also dealing with other issues. It's not just the education. The message we're pushing, what we're doing is really good. It's important and it's correct. But, there are other psychological factors about what are these people that aren't getting it? What are their backgrounds? What are their upbringings? How old are they? Where have they come from geographically? How do we then work with those factors and kind of know that, what, we aren't going to get every single person across the line and change every single mind and attitude. And you're still going to get disgusting comments. Like, one of the first comments I ever got when I started was, perhaps you should start showing a little less crotch. And I'm like, I'm advertising pants. How exactly do you not want me to show a crotch on someone when there are pants involved? They're not skirts. They're not church garments. They're not, and I think some of our energy almost needs to be redispersed into knowing we're not going to fix that. Let's concentrate on the future generations and keep going, looking forwards rather than trying to fix the stuff that's, almost in the past in that generation. And because at the end of the day, they're not the groups that are going to sort of prevent us from moving forwards anyway, and especially not in another 5-10 years. And so, yeah, like, it's been a very interesting experience. And I think the biggest part is that representation. Just keep pushing, the different women, the different body shapes. And it is happening. It is slowly getting there. But God, there's like so many avenues I can keep taking it down. I don't know which one to kind of go down to kind of keep chatting about it.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell me some of your other thoughts, and I can pick a path for us. But I do think that, like, just thinking about kind of the people who are listening to this podcast too are people who have felt historically excluded from the outdoorsy space, oftentimes because they don't see themselves represented, or they literally cannot find the gear that they need to fit their body. Like, I've spoken to quite a few of my friends on this podcast who are just like, it is impossible to find plus size gear that is even like safe for me to be wearing because it's just falling apart. Like you were mentioning before, like it's not made the same. The quality's bad, or it's not cute. It's ugly.
Yeah.
And there's just even things like that are enough to prevent people from not wanting to even go outside. So I know there's people that listen to this podcast and follow me on social media, and I talk a lot about like whatever way you can get out there is enough, but also brands do have like this responsibility to get you out there safely and comfortably and to feel good. Like there's no shame in being like, no, I also want to look good.
Well,
and I think go ahead. Yeah.
No, you kind of on the money, but it doesn't even come down to vanity like you're describing it. Like, yes, we want to look good, but there's like, again, it comes back to this whole psychology of confidence, right? And part of that is about being happy with what you're wearing, like, and not just the looks, but the feel more so. So it's a really, really valid point that something as vain as clothing can prevent you from doing something you enjoy or doing it comfortably, or like you said, even safely. Because, I've got a doozy of an example for you. And I went snowboarding. I went to New Zealand a couple of weeks ago for the trade shows over there. And I took my Saturday that I had and went snowboarding. And I wasn't comfy on the board I had. Okay. So it wasn't so much the clothing, but it was the board I was riding because I was renting a board. I ultimately ended up injuring myself because I was in the back of my head constantly thinking about it and injured myself on the snowboard. The same thing applies with clothing, because then all of a sudden, you're not thinking about what the run is. You're going, is my waist gaping? If I fall over, is snow going to get back down the back of my pants? And then all of a sudden you've missed a rock and smashed into it or whatever. And so the safety element around clothing and apparel for any outdoor activity is huge.
I think that's such a good example. You're absolutely right. I mean, there's been times where I've been out on a hike or on a long run, and all of a sudden something starts not feeling good. Like my sports bra starts chafing, or like, I don't know, my backpack starts squeaking, and then that's all I can think about. And then my form gets bad, or I'm not enjoying myself, so I'm not paying attention to the rock that I'm tripping over. Like there are real implications. And I think with outdoor stuff too, we are relying so heavily on our bodies to like do certain things. So
Mm-hmm.
if we're wearing clothing like that is too tight or that is uncomfortable or like is cutting into our rib cage or whatever it is, it makes us all that more aware of our bodies, which is not
Yeah.
always a good thing and always not a good distraction when we are a lot of the times going out into nature and be outdoorsy to get away from that noise and to like instead focus on nature or focus on the sport or focus on something totally different. It can totally take you out of that experience. So, I mean, I've had this experience like the handful of times I have gone skiing. I have worn pants that were so uncomfortable. Like that's all I could think about because it was
Mm.
like they're not stretchy, they're tight, and I'm like I remember I had my first pair of pants, snow pants in high school, and then I continued to still try to fit into them in college, which we all know is just not gonna. Your body changes, but that I
Part
remember
of it
that
is
being all I could think about.
you don't want to go buy another pair because it's stressful and
Right?
traumatizing in itself. So you'd rather keep trying to make what you have work.
Yes.
Like that's the
Yes.
psyche behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's also like the piece with like brands where with the people, the women who are investing in your company and the funding stage who lived in the US probably knew that they wouldn't be able to try those pants on physically,
Mm-hmm.
which is a
Mm-hmm.
huge risk, right? Because like with pants you want to
Massive.
be able to try them on physically, so for people to be able to be like, I see myself represented enough in the models that are being displayed. I trust in this brand enough that like I'm going to have the information I need to know if this is going to work with my body or not. I think speaks volumes to what you've been able to provide to the market because people are willing to be like, yeah, sure, I'll buy those online, which is a hard thing to
Yeah,
do.
it is. It is. We have so much, like somebody coined it. It was called pants trauma. And like, I love
Yeah.
using that term, but we do. And it's not just snow gear. It's all pants, to be honest. But we have that fear. And, one of the most recent like messages I got from someone who had ordered from the States was like, she left the package sitting there for 5 days because she was just so scared to open it and actually put it on out of fear that it wasn't going to work. Even though we had actually chatted and gone through measurements and she'd sent me some photos and we kind of, nailed it down to the perfect sizing for her. And even with that experience, she was still petrified to open them because everything else had been like that. And, providing for all these different shapes and sizes, as a consumer, and this is like, I feel like my superpower is that I'm a consumer, right? I've come from that. I didn't grow up in the snow industry or ski industry or outdoor industry. I didn't grow up doing manufacturing or fashion design or anything like that. I was just a consumer. And I always thought it was stupid that brands couldn't provide for all those different sizes or shapes or even heights. And now being on the other side of it and seeing exactly how easy it really is, it's even more stupid. Like, when you've got these brands that have, you know, huge profitability and, for them to release a line or two of clothing, even if they didn't sell a single piece, could be absorbed back into the overall, financial situation of their business, makes no sense. Why wouldn't they have done it? And why wouldn't they have gone to the effort? And it just really showcased that a lot of these decisions just come down to their financial wants, the profitability of a brand, not really the desire to actually be active or change or, put the research in because, as you touched on earlier, and we kind of both went off on a tangent there, it's like, things like getting the shape and the sizing right and the quality okay and the technical features there, it's all really, really possible. And, I hate being egotistical. It's why I don't even have the CEO or founder on my email signature. At the moment, it's chief ACL splitter, usually chief pants splitter. But, if I could do it as a single person, like, what the fuck were these companies doing all this time? And, it was really apparent too, because when I started going to those trade shows and talking to these stores, again, they'd be like, yeah, we've been telling the reps from XYZ that they needed to just change one or two things and they have a better product, but they never even listen. So even with the active feedback from stores and obviously the feedback the community gives on social media or direct to a company or anything like that, they still weren't doing it. And you kind of need to step back and kind of think and go, well, why? Is it purely financial? Is there some sort of gain? Like, because I wouldn't have been able to do it if there wasn't a real need for it. And there was. And, coming back around to that whole size range and the shape and all that, you know, there is a laziness that you see now from other brands, because you go, why are those bigger sizes only in black and gray or navy, and why don't they have the right fit in the cut? And I will say actually credit to the United States, because their clothing system, whilst I think it's a little confusing, actually at least tries to cater to plus size bodies better, in that you have your differences between an XL, a double XL, and a triple XL versus a 1X and a 2X and a 3X, which is actually a completely different shape and size. It does cater specifically to the needs of a bigger body, because bodies with a bit of fat on them move differently to bodies that are leaner. And it's not trying to go, you're fat, you're not. But, when I sit down, I've got a pooch on my belly. So my pooch hangs around. And when I sit down, the fat on my thighs splays out. And if you've got someone that's running on, say 15 or less % body fat, even if they're a size, say, 10, but they're just naturally big but less fat, their body sits differently. And so taking into consideration those movements of how our structure moves differently, at least there is some effort from some US brands with that different sizing system. But then again, it really should just be implemented into the main sizing range. Like, it's not like you have I could almost guarantee you're not going to have someone who goes into a 2X versus an XXL, because they're roughly the same size and just cut differently. That wouldn't want the other sort of thing. I've seen lots of try on videos where I've got a 2X, a 2X versus an XXL, and they both fit, but they just sit differently. So why don't you just include it into the mainstream sizing? Why isn't an XXL just taking those needs into consideration when they're being produced? So it's really been interesting, and I'm really thrilled that I can offer something like that, because it was kind of easy to do, or logical to do in a sense. I won't say easy, there's been a lot of ups and downs, but, and there is that whole, build it and they will come mentality. One of the biggest comments I've had is around, and it's more specifically around mothers who might have put on weight during their pregnancies or have always been a bit bigger, and they've not ever been able to go attend to the snow, play with their kids, because they couldn't find the gear. So all of a sudden they've got the gear. Guess what? They're going to go. Or someone who is, because our sizing works basically, we're 2 ahead. So a size US 10 is like a size 14 in Australia. So these women who are like a size 22, 24 sort of thing here, and they've gone, well, I've always wanted to go to the snow, but I just never even bothered because there's nothing out there that works for me. So that, going back to that barrier of being able to actually actively participate in something or trial something new is prevented by the clothing. And, if the proof is in the pudding, if I'm getting comments like that going, hey, I finally went to the kid with my snow and I could actually go ski with them rather than just sit in the cafe and watch, or even just go do snow play, it's amazing. And it's proof that, if you have it there, people will use it. And on the flip side too, people who are really petite, women that don't have to go and buy children's clothing just to get the length they need in a pant or the fit that they want. I've had a lot of people who are Asian heritage come to me because I offer this, shape of pant in a small size, like in a US 2, and it works for them, and they actually can get a technical garment because, yes, okay, they could go to the kids section and find something that works, but the technical features weren't there. Okay, the price was great and the patterns are way more fun, but
they're always made different. Yeah.
But they're made as like 5 or 10K pants. They're not really waterproof, and they're not made from nice materials, and they don't have a million pockets because kids don't need to carry stuff, and they don't have adjustability because, most people manufacture kids clothing knowing that they're probably going to buy something new again in 12 months time because they've grown. So they just don't bother putting effort into them. So for these, different people of different culture and heritage to be able to get something that suits them better has been really amazing too on that other side, because like I said, it's not just a size issue, it's a shape issue. And, being able to offer something that's technical at both ends of the spectrum is amazing. So, yeah.
It's incredible. I wonder, it's so interesting hearing you talk about how once you finally got into building this, how frustrating it was to see, like, okay, it's not easy, but it's not as challenging or crazy as I thought it was. So like these brands don't have an excuse to not be doing this. And you were asking kind of like why this is it purely financial? But then on the flip side, we've just talked about how there is a need for this and there is a huge market. I wonder, like, I don't know if there's any other component at play here that is less so like a business component of it and more so like you were saying, kind of this older generation, deep-seated prejudices and biases against people in larger bodies in the outdoors. The reason why this came to mind was actually I think this applies to people with disabilities as well, because I recently got a brand pitched me a product and like a brand partnership deal for my TikTok. And I was like, hey, I'm looking through your catalog right now. This is all really technical gear. Like it was all, really technical hiking pants, technical hiking like jackets and stuff like that. And right now I'm temporarily disabled. I'm not doing anything technical right now. I am like sitting outside. That's my level of activity right
You and
now.
me both. You and me both.
And I was like, which is totally like, I'm happy with that. But I just like got back to them. I was like, hey, do you have any other products that are like less technical? And like actually like sent them a couple of links to things I thought on their site would maybe be a better fit. I was like, if you want me to like promote your products and like showcase them, here are some things that probably would fit more organically than me wearing these like highly technical pants while I sit by a campfire.
Yeah.
And and they got back to me and their response was like pretty disheartening, but also not very surprising. Their response was, our target audience is highly active individuals and we are not interested in partnering further. And I was like, okay, I get that that's your target audience. Don't know why you reached out to me in the first place, because obviously you didn't do very much research on like what my content's about. But yeah, it was like very disheartening. And so I wonder, it made me think about like other brands, like maybe the reason why they don't want to invest in more inclusive sizing is because they have this like, well, our target audience is like high impact athletes or whatever. Not that a plus size person cannot be that level of athlete, because they most certainly can. Like we know that. But there is this like preconceived bias or whatever of like, just like how a disabled person, quote unquote, can't be outdoorsy according to this brand, just like other brands might see someone who exists in a larger body as someone who can't, quote unquote, be in their same target demo, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know. It just hearing you talk about this reminded me of that. And I was like, I wonder if there's anything there.
And no, there absolutely is something there. And it probably comes down to a few points. And I suppose I can feel qualified enough to talk about it too, because I've come from that design and marketing background. Like, yes, I was a graphic designer, but I actually work exclusively in corporate marketing teams. So whilst I'm not a marketing expert, I know how this shit works. And there's a few things, right? Do they get more money because they can advertise the technical features on a particular garment and therefore charge more for it? Because yes, from a manufacturing point of view, creating more technical garments does cost more, but the percentage of which they can then mark up because of the fact that they can actively advertise these technical features or advanced technical features is way out of proportion than the actual cost of those additional features, right? So they probably go, well, if we push some more techie stuff, give people the FOMO, like you've got to have the best of the best, we can actually make more, because the profit margin is actually going to be bigger because of that, advertising tactic. But then I get really frustrated, as you probably would, in going, why the fuck aren't those features just basic needs or basic for everyone, like just included as a base level? Why do you have to pay a premium to have something that should be really a minimum? Because, if you look at it in terms of snow gear, most gear that's aimed at resort riders, people that might go a couple of times a year, they might sell gear that's at a, 10K waterproofing at the most sort of thing at a cheaper price point. But now knowing that I know what I know, I'm going, well, hang on, why isn't everything just 20K as a minimum? Because really, it doesn't actually cost that much more to do.
Right.
And, if anything, if you created all your gear at 20K rather than having lines that are 5, 10, 15, etc., probably going to be cheaper for you to manufacture. And why not give everyone the decency of having some really good technical garments at a base level? Why, and like you said, why should the people that only go once or twice, or people who are less active or less extreme in the particular stream of that sport, be dictated to through pricing and, marketing psychology on what's a good standard, really? Why don't they? Just because they go twice a year, why shouldn't they deserve a 20K pant or a pant that's, fully waterproof versus rainproof? And so, yeah, you're bang on. It's so silly that they do think like that, because imagine if all of a sudden a brand put out a range that was 20K and had all the technical features and the bells and whistles, but was still at an affordable price point. And it's not to say you wouldn't make money on it. You absolutely would. Or maybe it's somewhere in between your base and your high end, but you make it more attainable. Then all of a sudden you'd have all these people coming to you going, hey, I'm going to buy from you because you're giving me something that's reasonable, makes me feel good, and you're supporting my wants no matter how grand or minimal they are. And for me, I look at that, and maybe this is why I'll never be rich, right? But I look at that and go, this is what we should be doing to support a community, because I'd rather be able to cater to more people than maybe only have a select few. And, I suppose it comes down to a business thing of volume versus profit margin. But there is so much more power in volume if you're talking about, an operational side of things. Volume gives you more opportunities around costs. It gives you more exposure as a brand. You've got more people wearing your gear. Like, it's more attainable. And this is the way I look at it. And again, maybe I will never be a bazillionaire, not that I actually want to be, but, because I don't think like these other brands are. But I'm okay with that, because I think everyone sort of deserves a good quality product, essentially, at an attainable level for general population, and not be just targeting, hey, if you're a hardcore, I eat nothing but granola bars and, eat, sleep and dream, climbing mountains, then that's the only person I want to sell to. Yeah,
Yeah. No,
my brain is angry right now. My brain is so angry right now. And look, everyone's got their own agenda. That's fine. But that kind of attitude is really, really sad, because at the end of the day, what happens in 12 months' time when you are feeling better and you might want to go on a walk, and then you can use it and tell everyone, hey, these guys supported me and gave me some stuff and I loved it. It was great when I went camping, and it was great when I went on a, 10-mile hike when I was feeling better, or whatever. It's just so silly. I think about reputation is so important in a brand, and the way that we market comes around loyalty and trust and, the value it's bringing to the community. So if you're shutting down those community people, at the end of the day, really, you're just ruining your own marketing experience, your advertising points.
yeah,
we've
it
seen
would
the
have been
whole
such
cancel thing. We've seen cancel culture coming strong.
It would have been such a good story to tell. I actually am now just thinking of another brand. It was a footwear brand that had reached out to me right before I got my surgery on my foot, and they were like, hey, would love to partner and stuff. And I was like, FYI, I'm not gonna be wearing shoes for like a month, but once I am, like, I would love to. And they were like, cool, like when you're back walking, like keep in touch. But in my mind, I was like, how cool of a marketing opportunity would that have been for them to like send me a pair of slippers, or do something cute. I was like, as a marketer, I'm always thinking through all of these different opportunities and how they're just missed opportunities to engage with your community and your audience. But like, there's stuff that you can't manufacture as a brand or as a marketing team. And I think that is because like there's so much that comes down to the core foundation of who you are as a brand. And like that's why, like, I just saw you post on your LinkedIn that TikTok video that people that were wearing your pants just made. Like, they weren't paid, they weren't like sponsored, they weren't gifted that stuff. They just made it because they were like, we love this product. And that is stuff that you can't buy. That's the stuff you can't manufacture. But that's truly born out of this commitment that you've had to building products for people, making them feel seen and just listened to and appreciated and welcomed in this space where historically it hasn't been as much. I think that's so amazing.
And yeah, that was mind blowing, because like full disclosure, they have done some photos for me, like being models and in photography for me. But I only met them through that opportunity because I kind of put out saying, I wanted local people in the community to come and be the models. And so, they went and did they were going to the snow. I asked them if they'd be happy to take a few more. And that was the extent of the scope was, could you go do some skiing? Someone's going to snap you while you're doing it, sort of thing. But then they just went above and beyond and like, yeah, here's some content for you. And here's the thing. And I was like, holy shit, like, that's so lovely. Like, but yeah, it wasn't reorganized. It wasn't payment. It wasn't like any of that sort of thing. And not that I expect everyone to do that, but just seeing people have fun in the gear has been just amazing. Like, I've said this probably to everyone who's sort of asked me questions or interviewed me or whatever, but I cry so much more now than I ever have in my entire life. And it's just out of like that joy and understanding of the problem that's being solved, because I've been an obese person in my life. I know a lot of people don't like that term if you're plus size, but I've been that bigger person, and I know the struggles from that as well. And now I'm sort of in this mid-size shape and size, and I still get it. But so being able to see from all different walks of life how it's changing people's life, when they go, I struggled, it's like, yeah, I get that. And I usually end up bawling my eyes out.
I would too. I mean, I will get a comment on one of my TikTok videos of someone saying, I never realized that I could be outdoorsy, or I didn't realize I counted, or I didn't realize that what I was doing was valid or enough or whatever until I saw your content. And for me, I'm like, oh my God, I cry every time I see a comment like that too. So
Yeah.
I mean, same, but similar.
No, it's a thing. It's that representation, right? It's that showing that it's okay to be a bigger person or a smaller person or a curvy person, a straight person, and going and doing things that are normally portrayed by, like I said, a size 0 blonde woman.
Yep. Yeah.
And like I said, no hate to the size 0 blonde women, but when you've only got this one picture, it creates this almost like vacuum of inclusion, of what inclusion is.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, just kind of coming back to what we were talking about at the very beginning of this episode, if you don't see yourself represented, you can't picture yourself in that position. And so by increasing representation just through like your marketing and stuff, but also from the people actually wearing your products out on the slopes, to actually making products that fit different types of bodies and are catered towards women's bodies specifically. I mean, you're eliminating this huge barrier that people have faced historically and opening up this world of joyful recreation and play and accessibility in the outdoors. It's amazing. It's so cool. It's so amazing.
And also then, like we said, changing the stigma of what that needs to be in terms of participation, that it's not we go backcountry and we go splitboarding or we do heli skiing and all that. But you know what? I go once a year and that still makes me worthwhile.
Yeah.
And I'm fully supported in that, level of participation. And there are no other barriers to that, which is the best.
Yeah, I love it. It's incredible. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, and I feel like, we've already been recording for an hour, even though I feel like we could keep talking for a while. We have a bunch of different avenues we could have gone down. But I wanted to close on 2 questions.
Yeah.
And the first was, I was just curious, it can be as long or short of a story as you want it to be, but I was curious how you came up with the name Nobody's Princess.
Yeah, so it kind of stemmed from, my partner was actually involved in sort of coming up with this idea, and my mother always used to call me her princess, but not in a nice, endearing, you're so cutesy girly way, but like, you're such a demanding little shit and everything has to be your way type thing. I think I knew what I wanted from a very young age and what I deserved. And, she used to call me her princess mockingly because I was a bit high maintenance in that sense. That makes me sound like a horrible child. And then I suppose the other part from it comes is that with my partner, he's always kind of said like, you're like a bird. Yes, I can put you in a cage, but you can never really be tamed or maintained. As soon as you open that door, you're gone, sort of thing. You're not really able to be owned by anyone or, hide down. He's very aware that I'm, want him, I don't need him type thing. And again, I'm painting a really horrible picture for myself, but I'm talking in the most extreme of examples here.
I can
So this
relate to both of these
idea,
stories, so don't worry.
but this idea of nobody's princess was, not about being high demanding and, not tie downable. God, these aren't even real words. It was more about the right to still deserve the best of the best without necessarily having to belong or be included with a certain demographic. And, it was it's one of the little taglines that came up for it early on was all the respect and none of the responsibility. And someone actually mentioned it's like, oh, so it's like a modern day, like Meghan and Harry type thing, she's still a princess, but they're not in the monarchy type thing anymore. And I'm like, yeah, in a sense, they still get the money and the perks and the status, but they don't have to have the responsibility of, they've been kicked out or, they had to, withdraw themselves from that monarchy system. So it's a bit like that in that, yeah, you can go to the snow, you can do your sport, you deserve everything everyone else gets. You deserve the same level of respect from the people who have been skiing since they were 2. You deserve the same level of respect regardless of what your career is or what your off-season hobbies are or your size or your shape. You deserve all that. You deserve to still be treated like a princess, but you don't have to belong. You don't have to be, you don't have to, what's the word I'm looking for?
Like fit
Yeah,
into this box.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't have to conform to a niche or a clique or a group or a stereotype to be entitled to it. And so that's sort of where it built from. And for me, it was probably like, I loved it as soon as it kind of came up. So I actually put a list of like 40 different names out to some of the Facebook groups I was in, like one of them being Miss Know-It-All, who's an Australian snow journalist, has a great, really big informative community. And she let me post this survey up in there. And that Nobody's Princess landed in that top 3. So for me, it was actually almost a public vote for the name, but the public basically backed what I was already wanting and thinking. So that's how the name came about. And it's kind of become really fitting because all of a sudden I am now trying to advocate for those people who feel like they don't belong and therefore don't get treated right in what they're trying to do, be it sport or inclusion or like, the apparel, and provide that for them and show them and go, yeah, it doesn't matter. You can still do it. You still have the right. You still, you go do it. We support you. So creating, it always is creating another clique or a community for the outsiders, the outliers, the people that don't feel like they have something. But yeah, still showing that you don't actually need that. Just go do it. That's what the brand name is and where it came from and what I'm trying to do with it.
I love it. I think it really is such a perfect fitting name. When we first connected, the name stood out to me so much because even though you have a personal story behind it, in my mind, I assigned meaning to what I thought of it too. And I was like, God, this is perfect. I love it. And just the concept of like, you are enough and you are worthy and you are worthy of having stuff that fits you, stuff that feels good, stuff that makes you feel good, and enables you to go out and pursue outdoor adventures, whatever that might look like for you. And I think it's so important and so impactful. So I think what you've built is amazing. And I'm super excited to see how the brand continues to progress. And I hope everybody listening to this podcast goes out and checks out your website. And I'll have it linked to the show notes and stuff. Before we close out, and you can kind of plug whatever you want, any parting words of wisdom for people listening to this podcast who like maybe have felt historically excluded from the outdoorsy world, whether that be snow sports or just apparel or whatever it might be, words of wisdom for them to feel encouraged and empowered to just get out there, however that makes sense for them.
I suppose the words of wisdom I'll impart, gosh, that sounds so formal, is my own personal reflections of how I felt because I was that person. I was that consumer. I was that coming from like growing up as a kid of a migrant was a rough trot. Then applying that to anything in life again just proved its challenges. And so I think the biggest thing I've come to understand that's helped me kind of push into believing that I can do what I want to do and I can be supported and I am worthy and, I should be included is that, yes, it's not all in your head. There have been active barriers. We have had shitty marketing. We have had these different groups creating these stereotypes that we need to fit into. And we have been actively not included and made to feel bad. And so that realizing it's not in your head, it's shit, but we're working on it, we're getting better. And because it's not you, you go do what you need to do. If you want to do something, there is going to be, I think the biggest part is that these bigger brands, these bigger groups, whatever it be, dominate, right? It's this vocal majority almost. No, it's actually more a vocal minority still, because it's the big brands that, the few big brands, the few big groups that are the loudest and kind of pushing what the norm should be. But, there are so many little brands, little companies, little communities that will support what you want to do, no matter how niche it is. If you're a plus size person that wants to go do ballet, you know what? There are brands and small companies that can do that. If you're a slimmer person who wants to become a world champion, eating competition, like competitive eater, there is someone that can support you in doing that. And that's not, the normal stereotype. So yeah, no matter what it is you want to do, just go do it, because there is enough support out there, albeit a little harder to find. And don't think that you're the issue. It's not you. There has been forces working against you. But as soon as you can come to peace with, well, not come to peace, but as soon as you can sort of connect those two, that yes, something really has been working against you, it's not just you and your own thoughts or your own lack of ability or whatever, then, it just opens up a whole new realm of what you can do and what your possibilities are in all aspects of life, not just sport and being outdoors.
That's an empowering message, and one that I definitely will take to heart whenever I'm feeling a level of imposter syndrome, or I'm gaslighting myself into thinking that I can't do X, Y, and Z. Just after this conversation, even I'm just like, okay, maybe I should give skiing another shot this year. Maybe this is the year that I try it again, because it's not me. I'm not the problem.
You are.
So, yeah.
It's not me. Hi, I'm not the problem. It's you.
Yes.
100%. Sorry, Taylor. But, we have so many challenges, and they just kind of stack onto each other. And it is very easy to go, you know what? Oh, maybe it is because I'm too big, I'll lose weight. Or maybe it's because I didn't grow up in this kind of, I grew up in a hot location, not a cold one. So therefore I'll never get it and not feel included. It's like, no, it's the responsibility. It should be the responsibility of everyone around you and us working collectively to make sure everyone feels okay to do whatever they want in whatever space they want in.
Yeah, I can't agree more. Well, I feel really happy ending on that note. I feel like super excited to just take on the world, and think that your message is so empowering and exciting. And yeah, I just hope everybody listening goes and checks out Nobody's Princess. But this is your time to kind of shamelessly self-promote. What's next for the brand? What's next for you? Where can people find you online? Tell us all the things.
The worst parts of promotion. I'm
Yeah.
horrible.
You're being forced into it.
So, in terms of where to find me, nobodiesprincess.com is the e-commerce site that I sell from, which is size and shape and height inclusive, women's ski and snowboard pants, jackets, bibs, and a few other little bits of apparel, on all socials, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Nobody's Princess. The SEO should be working pretty well now. So if you have a Google, it should pop up. In terms of brands, the biggest cry I've had is been trying to get some retailers into the US. So that's something I'm really working on. But, for this upcoming winter season, I'm finally able to do free shipping over to the States and Canada and North America.
Great.
So that's going to be hopefully really a bit of a, release of that barrier that might have stopped people from trying out the gear. And, hopefully we'll be able to, for me, being a small business, having to do things slowly is crucial. Being able to include the size offering, have different types of garments for, those that do want non-insulated and shell, is in the future pipelines, and a few other bits and pieces that I'll keep to myself because, we need a little bit of surprise in our life, right? So yeah, come and find me. If you're interested in the gear, please send a DM or an email or on the website chat. Very open to helping people because I know the struggles of buying online and want to make sure that these are the last pair of pants or the last jacket you ever need to buy.
Love it. So great. Well, thank you, Maria, so much for being here and talking. I know we
My
chatted
pleasure.
for a long time, so I really appreciate your time. Yeah,
Appreciate all the questions, like really thoughtful questions and really great topics to talk about. So thanks for having the space there for it.
Yeah, I feel like I could have picked your brain for a couple more hours.
Part two, it's
Yeah,
coming.
yeah. So for everybody listening at home, this concludes the episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you would like to engage more with the Outdoorsy community, you can do so on Patreon. So that's patreon.com/outdoorsy. You get access to bonus episodes, the Discord community server, and additional little bonus perks and things like that. But until next time, I hope that everybody listening is just able to get out there in whatever way feels good to them. And just remember that you belong out there.